be posted to the Vision Zero website, along with all other Vision Zero related materials, including meeting minutes and upcoming meeting schedules. All panelists will be responsible to mute themselves until they speak, and we have a lot of panelists today, so please make sure you do that. Due to FOIA and public access laws, please refrain from using the chat feature for anything other than our ability to coordinate and help speakers who need assistance using Zoom. The question and answer field at the bottom of the participant pane will be used for public comment. Please refrain from entering public comments into the Q&A field until the public comment portion of the meeting takes place. Public comment will take place at the end of the meeting, and participants may raise their virtual hands to signify a desire to speak and wait to be recognized. To do so, you may open the participant pane and click raise hand at the bottom of the panel. Participants may also utilize the question and answer field at the bottom of the participant pane. In-person comments will be prioritized ahead of those entered into the Q&A field. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our council chair and commissioner, Garrett Euclid.
Thanks, Aaron. I think what I'd like to do today is start with, since we have a huge packed agenda today, I would like to start though with some introductions, because I think we have a new participant from the Department of Motor Vehicles on today, and we haven't met in a few months, so we can just do quickly call out each agency and see who's here from each agency. So I'll start with DESP, Connecticut State Police.
Good morning, John Eckenpour, Sergeant from the State Police Traffic Services Unit and co-chair with Terry Thompson of the Enforcement Subcommittee.
Great, thanks for being here. Aging Disability Services.
Good morning, Commissioner. Jonathan Slifka, representing the Department of Aging and Disability Services.
Great to see you, John. Division of Criminal Justice, Chief State's Attorney's Office. Jackie on yet? Sorry.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jackie McMahon. I'm a Traffic Safety Resource Prosecutor from the Office of the Chief State's Attorney.
And do we have Office of Early Childhood on? Yet, okay. Is Public Health on?
Yes, this is Susan Logan from the Injury Violence Surveillance Unit at DPH.
Good to see you, Susan. Motor Vehicles.
Morning, everybody. Ben Arsenal, Deputy Commissioner. I also have Sean from MECA with me as well, too. Sean, you there?
Good morning, everyone. Sean from MECA. I'm the Department of Motor Vehicles Director of Communications.
Great. Good to see you, Ben. Welcome. And State Department of Ed. Okay, great. So with that, thanks everyone for being here today. Like I said, really very busy agenda today. So I am going to ask speakers to make sure to move along during your presentations. We have I think 6 different speakers lined up today, including our subcommittees. So we want to make sure to get everything in today. So Aaron, if you can move on to the next is we have to adopt our minutes from June 6th, which seems like a long time ago, but it's only been 3 months. We sent those out in advance to everyone. If they're approved today, we'll post them online. Do I hear any objection to approving the minutes? Hearing no objections, I will assume they are approved. Thank you, everyone. This is our first presentation, something that I asked to be added to the agenda. We have Robert Strasburger from the Automotive Coalition for Traffic Safety. He's the president and CEO. His group is working on something called the Driver Alcohol Detection System for Safety, or DADS. It's something I am very passionate and excited about. I truly believe this is something that can, in our lifetime, end drunk driving, which kills too many people and injures too many people every single day in our nation and across the world. So I don't want to steal his thunder, but I'm really excited to have him come on and talk to all of us at the council today and to anyone viewing from the public to explain what DADS is and the science behind it and where it's going. So Robert, I'll turn it over to you. I just want to thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about DADS, which I love doing, actually. But I'm going to heed your admonishment to move it along because you got a lot to cover. Aaron, if we could move to, I think it's next slide, and one more. So let me begin here. Let me just say at the outset, in putting together the deck of slides that I did for this meeting, there's several slides, mostly the ones with a lot of text that I put in there for your benefit after this meeting. So I'm not going to cover those per se, but let me just talk a little bit about the DADS program, and as was mentioned, it's the Driver Alcohol Detection System for Safety. What we are doing is developing vehicle integrated technology that is intended to, with high precision and accuracy, rapidly determine a driver's blood alcohol concentration, and then provide that information to an onboard vehicle module and make some decision about whether or not the vehicle should start or whether or not it should be put into gear, etc. This is a public-private partnership, a longstanding public-private partnership between NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, with whom I think you're all familiar, and the Automotive Coalition for Traffic Safety, which is a nonprofit that represents all of the light vehicle manufacturers in this country, with the exception of Tesla. And our role is to provide project management, project oversight, and the licensing of the technology. The program is actually split into two components, the so-called DADS Research Initiative, where we are developing the technology, and then the so-called Driven to Protect Initiative. So it has been our goal from the outset of this program to build consumer awareness and acceptance of the technology with the technology's readiness, so that when we're ready to push it into the marketplace, there are consumers there demanding it and helping us pull it into the marketplace. And I'll explain why that is so important in just a couple of minutes. Next slide, please. And go on to the next one if you could, Aaron. Thank you. So we, at the outset of this program, which began in 2008, we identified about 5 different technology approaches and about 18 different technology providers. We ultimately settled on an approach, which is an approach called infrared spectroscopy. And unless you're a chemist, I don't expect you to really know what that is, but it is a technique, a very common and widely accepted technique that's used in laboratories around the world in very expensive equipment to identify chemical constituents, compounds, etc., using infrared light. What we are attempting to do is use that technique, shrink it down, ruggedize it so that it can live in a vehicle for the life of the vehicle, which is about 20 years, and use it to identify alcohol that's in your system, whether it's in your breath or in your blood. And we're developing 2 technologies. One is a breath-based technology, and the technology is one where as you're entering your vehicle and putting your belt on and getting ready to put the vehicle into gear, we capture a sample of your breath, infrared light in a measurement cavity. It's pulled in, and we use infrared light to look at 2 things. One is the alcohol concentration in that sample, as well as the carbon dioxide in that sample. And by knowing how much alcohol and how much carbon dioxide is in that breath sample, we're able to determine your breath alcohol concentration, which can be correlated to the blood alcohol concentration. we look at alcohol, or we look at carbon dioxide for two reasons. One, we want to know that the sample is actually coming from a human rather than, let's say, a canister of air, or et cetera. But also we use it to be able to know that the sample is coming from the driver and no other occupant in the vehicle. Let me just say, with respect to the breath technology, it is nothing like a conventional breathalyzer. It uses infrared spectroscopy. You don't have to provide a deep alveolar lung sample. You don't have to breathe in any special way. The system does not need to be recalibrated, and there is no mouthpiece, so there's none of that plastic waste or anything else. The other approach that we're looking at is the so-called touch system that looks at your blood alcohol concentration in the capillary bed of your skin, below the surface of your skin. And if you've ever been to the doctor or the hospital and they clip the thing on the end of your finger to measure your pulse and your O2 concentration, it's a similar kind of concept. But here, the sensor would be embedded in a vehicle control that you need to actuate or use when you're starting the vehicle or initiating a trip. So either the push to start button, the steering wheel rim, or the gear shift lever. And the mere act of actuating that control in which the sensor is embedded, we would be able to measure your blood alcohol concentration, and then again provide that information to a control module on board the vehicle. Next slide, please. So this slide, obviously we've been very successful in our research. We've generated a lot of intellectual property. Frankly, if that intellectual property is never used or deployed, obviously it's useless. So my real point in displaying this slide is to say that, remind me to say that ACTS is a nonprofit. We will not make, sell, service, support the DADS technology in the field. Rather, we will license the technology to people who know how to do that, automakers and their safety system suppliers. Importantly, because we are a nonprofit, which means we exist to better society as a whole, we must license that technology to anybody on the same terms. So we will not be giving competitive advantage to GM over Toyota, for example, or Bosch over Continental. Rather, they will get the technology on the same terms. They will have open access to it, and it will be up to them as to how they ultimately integrate it into their products and how it's used. And whatever competitive advantage they wish to have, they'll have to gain that through how they've chosen to integrate it into the vehicles and how it functions, etc. And the whole point of this activity is, one, to develop the technology and then see that it is widely deployed as rapidly as possible. And the structure whereby ACTS as a nonprofit owns that and openly license it is, we think, furthers that objective. Next slide, please. So the way we will do this is we have chosen to adopt the electronics industry's reference design concept. So a reference design is one where, if you're a licensee, we would be providing to you all of the drawings, the bill of materials, the know-how, and all the other information that you would need as a licensee to practice the technology, make it, sell it, service it, support it. It's a very similar concept to, I believe you're all familiar with the USB port. That's in a situation, a USB port is actually a reference design. The various electronics industry suppliers came together, said we needed a port that looks like this, functions as in this manner, etc. And they standardize that port, and now that's what you see on all your laptops and other computer devices, etc. Very similar concept here that we are pursuing with DADS. And again, as I say, we will openly license this technology to anybody that has the ability to make it, service it, support it, etc. And they will get the same terms. Next slide, please. So what's going to happen and when is it going to happen? As I mentioned, we are developing two different sensors, a breath sensor and a touch sensor. What I'm showing here, actually, we have successfully commercialized one version of the breath sensor. We did that back at the end of 2021. It's the so-called directed breath zero tolerance device. So it is not a system that functions passively, but rather one that you must turn at and give it a puff of air like you're blowing out a candle in order for it to make its measurement. And we have set it at 0.02, effectively zero alcohol concentration. And it really is intended for use in fleet vehicles or as an accessory device in situations where a fleet operator wants to ensure that their drivers are alcohol-free, or let's say you're a parent of a newly licensed teen and you want to make sure your teen is not consuming alcohol and driving a vehicle. As it turns out, just last Friday, the first licensee for this technology announced that it was now ready to begin selling and servicing this technology. And I will try to provide more information about that to Aaron after this call. Going forward, we want to improve upon this technology and make it fully passive. So you just get in the car, breathe naturally, and we will know what your breath alcohol concentration is. Our target for completing the reference design for the breath sensor is by the end of 2025. So just roughly 2 years away. And that will be a fully passive device intended for mass production in automotive quantities, in automotive quality standards. It would be set at 0.08, which is the legal limit in all 50 states, but Utah, it would have the ability to be set at 0.05. Over the course of time, as we develop this technology, we've got it to perform very, very linearly. So if we do need to move to 0.05, say from 0.08 in the future, which is certainly possible, the technology is capable of doing that. Next slide, please. The other technology, of course, is the touch sensor. When we began this program, its development was less mature than the breath, although it is gaining on the breath technology. But where we're at the moment, last year, we completed our first benchtop unit of the technology. That is a laboratory instrument that we were able to conduct test with human subjects. And by the way, I should mention that as we are developing this technology, we very, very rigorously test the technology first in the laboratory on the bench, and wherein we bake the sensors to 185 degrees Fahrenheit and then freeze them to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Those typical temperature range is automotive components C. We then, after we have successfully demonstrated that the sensor can meet all of our performance specs in the lab, we then introduce our first variable, which is a human. So we do human subject testing in a clinical setting, actually at McLean Hospital, which is part of the Harvard Medical School. And then ultimately, we integrate the sensors into vehicles and do closed course testing of the sensors using dosed drivers, and open road testing of the sensors using dosed passengers. Obviously, on the open road, we can't be testing, can't be dosing drivers. So the sensors are very, very rigorously tested, and will be once we hand off to vehicle manufacturers. But we completed our benchtop unit in 25. We are in the process of completing our so-called functional sample this year. And we hope to be able to complete a reference design of the touch sensor no later than 2027. And again, this would be for installation in all consumer vehicles, automotive quality standards, integrated at the time of mass production, set at either 0.08 or 0.05. Next slide, please. So one thing to point out is that, when I mentioned 2025 or 2027, that's when we are handing off to the vehicle manufacturers for them to do their job, their job in integrating the technology into vehicles. And that will be a process of roughly 18 to 24 months. So we are validating the technology at the component and system level, and they need to integrate the technology into their vehicles and validate it at the vehicle level. And so when I say when we complete our work in 2025, we're handing off to the vehicle manufacturers or other product integrators, and you should see it in the market roughly 2 years later. So about 2027 with the breast sensor, and about 2029 with the touch sensor. Next slide, please. And this aligns very well, frankly, and not by accident, with a mandate that is in the infrastructure bill that was enacted in November of 2021 that requires technology like the DADS technology in all new vehicles by a date certain. In this case here, it is intended, hopefully, that the implementation of the technology in vehicles would happen roughly in the 2027 timeframe. Although the agency, NHTSA, has time, if it needs more time, it has the ability to take more time. But I think you can safely expect and plan on this technology, and by this technology, I mean vehicle integrated technology, certainly DADS, but there might be others, to begin showing up in new motor vehicles by the close of this decade. So in the 2027 to 2030 timeframe, this technology will begin showing up in vehicles in this country. There are actually other policy initiatives in other regions of the globe that are driving to a similar outcome in a similar timeframe, particularly in Europe. So it's good to see, because it adds additional momentum to our own efforts as well. Next slide, please. Let me just say, with respect to the mandate, it is Congress's intent, at least as I read it, that they always want to be technology neutral. That's good public policy. We support that. So DADS technology certainly would be a compliance option. I would argue the leading compliance option. But what is shown here is the text from the bill that also would allow subsection A, would also allow technology, so-called driver monitoring technology, that uses for the driver focused cameras to monitor what the driver is doing and how the driver is performing the driving task, and making some decision about that driver's fitness to drive, whether or not they are fully fit or they're impaired because they're impaired by alcohol or inattention or distracted, what have you. Next slide, please. So over the years of this program, we've done a number of estimates of the safety benefits that we think would accrue from deployment of the DADS technology. One estimate, and this is done by the University of Michigan Transportation Research Institute, actually my alma mater, over the first 15 years of deployment of the technology, An estimated 59,000 fatalities would be avoided, and 1.25 million injuries, and about over 300 or nearly $350 billion in injury-related costs saved. So very, very significant safety benefits. Our own testing to date would support these estimates. And we believe we're probably looking at a technology that is among the most effective and may well eclipse the effectiveness of the 3-point safety belt, which remains our most effective technology to date. Next slide, please. So the other thing I want to talk about quickly is our so-called Driven to Protect initiative. Next slide. This is the initiative that we are under which we develop consumer acceptance and demand, hopefully, for the technology. What I am showing here are various other safety technologies that have that looked at either changing how drivers behaved in the case of the seatbelt interlock, or the 3-point belt, or the frontal airbag. And my point here is, just because we have a particular technology doesn't mean it gets used. Oftentimes, there's an implementing technology that also needs to be invented, and that certainly is the case with the frontal airbag. We needed a reliable means of knowing that there was a crash and that it was of sufficient severity to require deployment of the bag. But even when we had that technology in 1975, if you're old enough to remember, and I am, we went through the so-called airbag wars, and the deployment of that technology was delayed by 15 to 20 years. The seatbelt, 3-point belt, progressed rather quickly, is happy to say. But the seatbelt interlock, which was highly effective, didn't even survive a year. And that's because it failed to capture consumer acceptance. They pushed back against it. In fact, they pushed back at a time when Congress was having to deal with the Watergate constitutional crisis, and they had to take time away from that very important issue to rescind their mandate. And there's a lesson here, and it's a lesson that we best not forget. And that is, next slide. Well, we can go to the next slide even. This is just a summary of the seatbelt interlock, and that is, we really need 3 things in order for the technology to be successful. We need a technology. It's got to be practical. It's got to be viable. It's got to be effective. Certainly, we need a regulatory mandate, and we've got that in this instance. But that doesn't mean just because Congress demands that it be done that we will actually be successful. We need a commercially viable technology. I am very certain that we will have one by the 2025 timeframe, if not 2. We've got the mandate, but the last frontier, the thing that is going to make the difference between success and failure, is consumer acceptance. As we are now getting to the point in time where we really need to ramp up our efforts to capture consumer awareness and acceptance of this technology. Next slide, please. And so the way we're going about doing that is we are working with individual states to conduct trial deployments of the technology involving fleet vehicles, and using those trial deployments, one, to exercise the technology and stress the technology, which gives us data to help us further refine the technology and improve it. But also it helps us to generate success stories that we then can leverage to build awareness and acceptance. And then we have another component of the Driven to Protect initiative where we're going out to in-person events, minor league ball games, fairs where alcohol is served, NASCAR events, etc. These are all by design events where alcohol is typically consumed. Our technology is on site. People are able to experience it for themselves. And our research shows that if you're familiar with it or you've had a chance to experience it, you're far more likely to accept it than if it's just a object or obscure concept. But we don't stop there at the in-person events. We have a high school STEM program that really is targeted at the folks that are one of the biggest groups most at risk of alcohol impaired driving, our newly licensed drivers. And so it's an opportunity to, one, educate, get the students excited about a career in science and technology and engineering, but also an opportunity to give them information about the dangers of driving after drinking and how they might avoid those dangers. And then because of the pandemic, a silver lining, we took that whole STEM program and moved it online because we obviously couldn't be in person at events or in schools during that period. And so a lot of the information that we would present at the in-person events or in the STEM program is now available online. Next slide, please. So we'll actually be coming to Connecticut in, I guess it's roughly 2 weeks. We will have one of our demonstration vehicles at the UConn Utah State game that's to be held on the 30th of September. So if you're in the area, I think you may need a ticket to the game. I'm not sure. But if you're in the area and you're interested, I hope you come by and see us on September the 30th. And let's see, the next slide, Aaron, that may be the last. Yeah, that's the last one. So that's really a high level overview, and I will look forward to taking your questions if there are time for questions.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the presentation, and I'm glad you. Well, two things. One, I'm excited that Connecticut DOT is able to get involved with you all and help raise awareness of this, because the way you ended, pointing out that consumer acceptance is going to be critical. This provision, that provision you referenced in the federal infrastructure law, was one of those that really slipped under the radar. It was something I was watching the whole time, and a lot of people missed it. And the rulemaking requirement has the potential to have a great positive impact on our entire nation's safety. But as you pointed out with the seatbelt interlock, there's the risk that it could be undone. So helping raise awareness and consumer acceptance is going to be critical. So I'll open it up to the council members if they have any questions about the program, about the technology. I have a couple I want to ask about, but I'll turn it over to the council members first because I've had the opportunity to meet with your team. Jackie.
Morning. This is really fascinating. I echo Commissioner Eucalito's comments. Mine is a little bit off course, but I'm curious about the touch technology and whether there's been any consideration in incorporating that into some chemical testing in the enforcement realm. So right now we use breath test instruments at our police departments and things like that. Is there any maybe effort in that realm to incorporate this into DUI enforcement actions and maybe getting that into the public sphere faster than the 2027 timetable? Thank you.
Right. The answer is no, because our focus is on completing development of the technology for vehicle integration. However, we do recognize that what we are developing has other applications, as you point out. And so I can see that happening after, or and I don't think it would be that difficult to generate a field device, for example. In fact, I would say that field device might not look that different from our own laboratory instruments that we're using on the bench at the moment. But no, our focus at the moment is on completing the technology for vehicle integration. But we do understand it's likely there's a good possibility to be used in other ways. And I might also say that in in our instance, the measurements that we're making ultimately are going to be linkable to the gold standard, which is the blood draw. Because we are doing that human subject testing both in a clinical setting and in the field.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other council members have questions? I have one add-on to Jackie, and then if other council members want to raise their hands or just turn on your camera and ask the question. So tying on to similar to what Jackie brought up, maybe this is taking it beyond where you're working right now. When I look at a lot of what's happening on the roadways, a narrow subset, when I look at wrong way drivers that kill people, right? Nearly 100% of them are impaired. And the vast majority of them are impaired by alcohol. And then probably 50% of them also have other substances in their system. So the other substances, this is targeting alcohol, which is a huge driver of the impairment on our roadways, but we will also have drug impaired polyuse, both alcohol and drug, prescription drugs. So do you foresee something once this technology advances for alcohol, is there that next step to be able to develop something that can detect drug impairment behind the wheel? Because essentially cars right now are essentially computers on wheels, right? So just wondering, and you may not be able to talk too much about it, but just wondering where you see the future.
Yeah. The short answer, Commissioner, is yes. As I mentioned, we're using a technique called infrared spectroscopy. In this case, we've chosen to use it to identify ethanol or ethyl alcohol. But we can, and we've actually done a white paper on this, internal white paper. We could do the same thing, for example, for THC or any other substance of concern. We wouldn't be able to do it directly. Additional research would be needed, for example. But what we have learned in terms of packaging the lasers, powering the lasers, managing the lasers, etc., would all port over from the alcohol to other substances. The research that we would have to do is looking at the quote unquote, the recipe for the silicon wafer. Right now we've got a recipe that we have for alcohol, and it's probably as much art as science. So we would have to develop a new recipe for THC, or a new recipe, name your, let's say fentanyl, for example. And that would be, an effort. I don't know if I can say how long an effort would be. I would like to say that, what we learned and how in the recipe development would also at least help and aid us in the recipe development for these other substances of concern. So I am hopeful that once we're done with alcohol, that we will be able to turn to THC, for example.
Great. And then one final question I had was, on your chart, you showed, I think, Gen 3.3, which is in commercial use, is set at 0.02. I think you showed Gen 4.0 and beyond is showed between 0.05 and 0.08. So the technology, based on the advancement in the technology, you're able to scale or set the threshold sensitivity to whatever threshold that state is. So like UConn's going to be playing Utah State, I think, right? On the 30th, Utah is at 0.05, Connecticut's at 0.08.
Right.
Would the vehicles be able to be set at different BACs based on the state they're in?
They'll have to be. They will have to be, and the answer to that is yes.
Okay.
How sophisticated that becomes will ultimately be up to the vehicle manufacturer, but certainly vehicles delivered to Utah for sale in Utah would be set at 0.05. Vehicles delivered to, I think I recall my geography, Colorado's next door, would be 0.08. But whether or not the technology exists with geofencing or whatever to, as you cross that state border, the system may be able to automatically adjust.
Yeah.
But that's a level of complexity that, with a level of complexity, also you introduce reliability concerns. So I don't know what manufacturers will plan for in that case.
Okay, great. And Susan,
Good morning. Just had a question about the technology itself. Did you say that, I might have missed this, infrared radiation is going to be used to detect the ethyl alcohol?
Actually, infrared light.
Infrared light, okay.
Yeah. So if you,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, if you, take a flashlight and hold it up to your palm, if you've ever done that. I mean, we're shining light, into your skin, and the amount of light that is reflected back to our sensors is proportional to the amount of alcohol that's in your system. So the infrared light is absorbed by the alcohol. So if there's, if a certain amount is going in and we see a lesser amount coming back, then we know that that is proportional to the amount of alcohol.
I was wondering, has there been any concern about any health impacts to having this technology very close to your face?
Yeah. So, I mean, we are obviously, we are using lasers. Lasers are used to cut things, etc. So we keep these at very, very low power, where they won't do, less power than even the laser pointer, etc. So we are mindful of that, and we will be keeping the power level such that it won't be harmful to anyone in terms of their eyes, burning of skin.
Right, that's what I was concerned about, like the eyes and the skin, and I work for the Department of Public Health, so just looking at the health impacts of that. Thank you.
Right.
great. Any other questions from council members? Robert, I really appreciate you taking time to join us today. I had the opportunity to tour the lab up in Massachusetts. It was fascinating to see the work that goes on up there. And I'm excited to see the demonstration at the UConn game. So appreciate everything that you all are doing to help try and make our roadways safer. And if council members have follow-up questions, we'll be sure to pass them along, and any additional materials you have that we can post on our website for the council, for the public, we'll do that as well.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity, and please, if you do have questions, please forward them along. Questions are very helpful to us, and we like to answer them too, just for no other reason than, we want people to be familiar with this technology.
Absolutely. Thank you again.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Have a good one. So like I said, packed agenda, we're going to move on to the next presentation. Since our meeting in June, we had a big update here at Connecticut DOT. Really ties into everything we're talking about here at the Vision Zero Council about making our roadways safer for everyone. So we invited our engineering administrator here at ConnDOT. His name's Mark Carlino, to talk a little bit about what this new Complete Streets Controlling Design Criteria is. I think in the press release, I pointed out that it sounds technical, but it has a huge impact. So I wanted to make sure Mark could brief the council members on this big change that we're going to be implementing here at ConnDOT. So Mark, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, everyone. Happy to be here with all of you today. And we're going to talk about our new Complete Streets Controlling Design Criteria. Next slide, Aaron, please. So just a few weeks ago, the commissioner signed a new policy establishing Complete Streets Controlling Design Criteria. And we have a subsequent engineering constructive directive that lays out the details and justification surrounding the policy. That was signed by our chief engineer, Scott Hill, just a couple of days later. Next slide, please. And for those of you that are not familiar with the federal highway design process, controlling design criteria is the highest level of achievement that a designer needs to do when it comes to a highway or bridge project. It involves things such as stopping sight distance, horizontal curvature of the roadway, bridge width, maximum grade, intersection sight distance. So when we were developing this policy statement, we wanted to achieve the same high level of threshold for designers to achieve when it came to the three areas of pedestrian facilities, bicycle facilities, and transit provisions. And so collectively, each of these three are called our complete streets controlling design criteria. Next slide, please. So in order to, for project application, we wanted to start really with DOT managed projects. So each of these four elements have to apply to a project. DOT is sponsoring the project. DOT is administering the design and construction of the project. DOT is responsible for project funding. That means it's either state or federal aid funding that's going into the project or a combination of both. And DOT controls the infrastructure, meaning a state highway. We did not want to impose this, obviously, on local municipalities, although we're excited that, you know, as we get underway and get more practice with this, we're hoping that more municipalities do want to administer and build in some of these elements into their projects. So as far as an implementation plan goes, you know, our projects generally fall into three categories. Ones that have not been initiated yet. So any project that is initiated after September 1st needs to comply with this new directive. Projects that are currently in the design phase right now and that are in final design phase are exempt from needing this this policy statement. However, we're looking at all designers to see what elements of it they can incorporate into their design, even though they're at the very final stages of the project delivery. And then we have projects that have not yet reached formal design approval. They're basically in the preliminary design phase. We are requiring that every division chief review these projects with the design team, that they complete the review by the middle of November, and that we look to incorporate any elements of this new policy into those projects that are still in the design phase. Now, it's probably going to be challenging to all of a sudden require projects to have sidewalks initiated and right-of-way acquired on these active projects, but there's certainly other elements of this design criteria that I'll get into that we expect will be rolled into these active projects. Next slide, please. So starting with the pedestrian facilities, this new policy requires that pedestrian facilities be provided on both sides of a roadway in urban areas, urban clusters, and rural town centers, and roadways that have a high likelihood of pedestrian use. Our team in the Bureau of Policy and Planning has developed a tool that they have been working on of pedestrian traffic generators. So we have a number of things that are available to our design team to be able to help supplement and understand the high likelihood of pedestrian use within a project area. And for bridge projects, any bridge project that's on a federal aid highway or on a rural road carrying more than 1,000 ADT and is going through a significant bridge improvement, meaning a deck replacement, a superstructure replacement, or a full replacement, will need to also comply with the policy of providing pedestrian facilities on both sides of the roadway. Next slide, please. So we are looking to build facilities that are a minimum of 5 feet in width. We are looking to provide crosswalks at every leg of a signalized intersection where sidewalks are present or proposed. And knowing how critical it is to have illumination at these crossings for pedestrian safety, we're requiring that illumination be provided at each of these crosswalks as they cross state roadways. Another element that we're building into this, as we are replacing traffic control signals or doing substantial upgrades to traffic control signals within these projects in the project areas, we are looking to implement activated no turn on red prohibition signs, basically blank out signs that either prohibit the driver from making a right turn on red when there would be a pedestrian present within the crosswalk, And again, another design safety feature. Next slide, please. Moving to the bicycle facilities, we are looking to provide bicycle facilities on all roadways where bicycles are legally allowed, except roadways that are functionally classified as local roadways. Bridges, again, the same provision when we are doing significant rehabilitation or replacement work, such as deck replacements, superstructures, and full replacements, will also have bicycle facilities provided on them. Next slide, please. This is a sample of the facility selection matrix that was developed for the design team to utilize. It's focusing on the combination of traffic volume and posted speed limit to determine what is the appropriate bicycle facility for that section of the project. Next slide, please. And based upon that facility is selected, there's a minimum criteria that would be provided for either a paved shoulder or bicycle lane, buffered bike lane, separated bike lane, either a one-way or two-way bike lane, or a shared use path. Next slide, please. And thirdly, the transit provisions will be provided whenever there is a DOT or a transit district operator within the project limits. We would require that the preliminary design plans be submitted for formal review by the Office of Transit and Ride Sharing and Rails. That way they provide direct feedback on these projects and an understanding of what provisions would be needed to support those existing facilities. We'd be providing a shelter or a bench at all traffic stops that have high levels of boarding or low levels of frequency of service. We know that providing a means for a pedestrian and a transit user to cross the road is very significantly important. We are requiring that we provide a crossing within 400 feet of any proposed or existing transit stops. Now, we're not really in favor of mid-block crosswalks, so this would have to be worked very closely with our Office of Traffic Engineering to provide crossings that are going to be safe for all users. Another provision would be to make sure that all transit stops have a means of illumination, and certainly that all transit stops require and meet ADA requirements. Next slide, please. So this gets into a little bit of the details, but each of those three controlling design criteria for pedestrians, bicycle, and transit provisions have a detailed worksheet that the design team would need to be filling out at project initiation. And then as the design progresses into the preliminary and final design stages, supplemental worksheets would be required by the design team as more details of the project are developed. These project worksheets would be saved throughout the history of the project. So here's the really important part. Because this is a controlling design criteria, and any deviation where you can't achieve this would require a design exception be approved. Now, these other controlling design criteria that we already have in place that I described earlier, such as the stopping sight distance, intersection sight distance, and geometric features of the roadway, come to myself, the engineering administrator, to rule on approve any design exceptions. The commissioner established this as a higher threshold for the complete streets controlling design criteria exceptions, that these need to go to the chief engineer for any type of design exception. So this higher threshold makes all the designers aware of the high importance of this. And any rulings that the chief engineer makes are also going to be notification to the commissioner's office. Next slide, please. This just shows kind of the workflow of project initiation and the establishment of these worksheets and reviewing the controlling design criteria. And then as the project moves into the design phase, where needed revisions to these worksheets may be needed and how they would come to the chief engineer if they want to propose any exceptions to these requirements. Next slide, please. and just an image of some of the worksheets that have been prepared. So, next slide, please. And knowing the time is short, I didn't want to get into too many details, but I'm certainly happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Any of the council members, feel free to raise your hands or jump in, but I'll, in the meantime, I'll add that, you know, I really want to thank you, Mark, and your team, as well as the staff in policy and planning, who took this on and really worked hard over several months to pull this together. You listened to the challenge I gave you all when I came into this job several months ago, and appreciate you know, the work that you've done on that. So to come up with something that I think is pretty you know, comprehensive and important, and it's going to have an impact in Connecticut across the state. It's going to take some time. As I told one of the reporters who asked about this isn't something that's going to change our infrastructure tomorrow, but it starts the process. And we have a lot of infrastructure out there in our state, and a lot of it's old. So it's going to take some time to retrofit and rebuild and build it out, but it's going to have a positive benefit for all of us. Okay, Eileen, I saw you put a question in the, so if you want to jump in.
Sure. Thank you very much, Mark. I know very little about the design criteria, so a few questions came to my mind in terms of non-drivers. I have a friend who uses a significantly sized electric wheelchair, lots of parents with strollers. How would the specifications for either pedestrian lanes or cycling lanes affect those folks, and how might we, I'm on the education subcommittee as well, how might we share that message with others?
Yes, so you know, the provisions that we've come together are based upon some of the national standards that are out there for shared use paths, bicycle facilities, and sidewalks. So we think that we have accommodated all of the different non-driver types of vulnerable users that may be out there on the roadways. If you have anything specific, I would certainly be happy to talk with you offline, making sure that we do have a mechanism within the policy and the design criteria that we could accommodate all users. That's very much our goal here. And I could share my information offline so that we can talk.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mark. I have an adult son who lives in Boston, and I see e-scooters and bicyclists and drivers sometimes meeting each other in unfortunate circumstances. So it's a real concern.
And one of the things we've talked about extensively with the commissioner is the challenge of the speed at which people are driving our roadways. And, you know, as in parallel, we are working on ways that we can start designing roadways that really kind of force drivers to drive slower speeds and more appropriate speeds through especially our areas where you're going to expect to see pedestrians and other users of the roadway. It's a big challenge out there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eileen. Any other council members? Susan, do you want to jump in? Or I can read it if you, oh, there you are.
That's okay. I just wanted to say that I'm really happy this is moving forward, and hopefully we'll see some impact on injuries related to transportation. So for both, you know, pedestrians, drivers, as well as bicyclists. So yeah, I'm really excited about this. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Any other questions from council members? If not, and we'll have materials posted on the Vision Zero Council website, which is hosted on the DOT page. I think there's a link right on the main page. We'll be able to post these materials after the meeting. So any council members, if you want to share them with any of your colleagues who work in the space, as well as any members of the public. And I think, Mark, we've shared this with the various councils of governments. Did you brief them yet? Or I think we are planning on briefing them.
We're planning to brief the councils of government. We're also working on getting some of our consultant engineers, part of our team, up and educated on these as well. So There'll be a continued rollout over the next couple of weeks and months.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, everyone.
So, Aaron, I'll turn it back to you. What's next on the agenda?
Next, we're asking for an update from council members on what what actions their respective executive branch agencies are taking or considering due to the guidance set forth in what, for lack of a better word, we're calling the Vision Zero Act, Public Act 23-116.
Great, thanks, Aaron. Yep. So for those of you who remember, Public Act 23-116 was the Vision Zero bill that became law this past session. Had a lot of different provisions that reflected recommendations from the Vision Zero Council and the various subcommittees. So all the work that everyone engaged to date put in resulted in this major safety bill. We had heard, I think, from folks from the public as well as council members and subcommittee members that they wanted to hear what's happening now with this, now that the bill has taken effect. So I can start from the DOT perspective and say what we've done with various provisions to date, and then maybe I'll ask, I think definitely DMV as well as maybe the Chief State's Attorney's Office. I know they're both called out in the bill. So from the DOT side, I think we have a bulk of those provisions. There's certain pieces dealing with automated traffic enforcement, which probably is the bulk of the bill and the most high profile portion of the bill. Those pieces are actively underway here at ConnDOT. Our Office of the State Traffic Administrator has set up a working group here in the agency to develop language, laying out the two different sets of guidance for municipalities who want to have automated traffic enforcement in their municipality, because ultimately it has to come to DOT for approval. So they have a draft. They're starting to brief, I believe, some of the subcommittees. They're planning to meet with some of the subcommittees to share that language. They're meeting with the legislators who were involved in drafting of legislation to get their feedback as well. The aim is to get this published by the end of the year so municipalities can begin to apply to institute automated traffic enforcement in their community. We wanted to make sure, the goal is to make sure that it's not overly burdensome for the municipality to provide the materials necessary for our review here at ConnDOT, but we do need to comply with all the provisions in the legislation that dictate what needs to be included in any proposal. So we're going to try and balance that by telling municipalities who maybe don't have as large an engineering or public works team or a traffic team so that they can know where to go to get some of the data that's requested in the legislation. So we have been actively engaged in that all summer, trying to develop that guidance. We also are working on, there was a provision in the bill to mandate a study on the Idaho stop for bicycles at, not have to come to a complete stop if there's no traffic coming from the other direction. So that is underway to develop, to conduct that study, as well as a team in our Office of Engineering to draft and adopt an intersection control evaluation policy. And then finally, from our side at ConnDOT, our new Safe Routes to School coordinator, she set up a working group with the education subcommittee of the Vision Zero Council to develop that exemplary Vision Zero program. So that is underway to try and set that up. The Safe Routes to School Day, I believe, is coming up in next month. So there's a lot of activity around Safe Routes to School. So stay tuned for that. But we are working to develop that exemplary Vision Zero program for schools and students, and working with the subcommittee here on the Vision Zero Council. So with that, I'll see DMV or Jackie, either of you want, oh, Sean, there you are from the DMV. I'll let you jump in.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. DMV has had a handful of internal conversations in response to the Vision Zero Public Act requiring all drivers to watch a video presentation upon every other renewal cycle. Our initial thought is to create a video that focuses on motorists, pedestrians, and cyclists and really highlight the new laws and some safety messages. This will align the video with the requirements within the Public Act, as well as highlight the content within our driver's manual. We'd like to keep the overall messaging evergreen so that it remains relevant and can be used long-term. The Public Act requires that this video be viewed every other renewal cycle. Our license renewal periods are usually every 6 to 8 years. This project is currently in its earliest stage and many of the details still need to be ironed out, but I look forward to providing you with more information at our next meeting.
Great, thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
I think, Jackie, there was a provision, if I remember, dealing with, I forget what there was something dealing with people who it's maybe their first offense or something, right? So I'll stop talking and let you explain it.
Yes, so the language in the Public Act essentially gives prosecutors the discretion to allow an individual who's been charged with certain traffic violations to participate in offense-specific diversionary programs as part of that plea negotiation process. So this is actually something that prosecutors have been doing historically for many years. They're going to continue to do that. And just like DMV, DCJ is having some internal conversations about whether to expand that and how we would go about doing that.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Sorry for butchering that explanation.
You nailed it.
Any other council members have any provisions? I failed to bring up the entire bill. There was a lot in there, and I failed to bring it all up in advance of the meeting. So, okay. So I know it's only been a few months. So as we roll out more over the course of the next year, I'm sure we'll have more updates for everyone on those provisions. And once the automated traffic enforcement provision, which made up the bulk of the bill, gets out, we'll share that with all the council members, and we'll be obviously sharing that with the public and all municipalities too. Okay, Aaron, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thank you, Garrett. So next, we're going to have an update from our subcommittees. I think most of the folks who attend these meetings regularly are familiar with our 4 subcommittees that were established by the council. At the last Vision Zero meeting, council members asked the subcommittees to get back together and reconvene prior to this meeting. And they're going to go ahead and give us an update on what kinds of conversations they've been having during that time. So first up, we have our engineering subcommittee, and that's co-chaired by Natasha Fatu and Chuck Harlow. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Good morning. Chuck, you might be on mute, Chuck. He's going to start us off.
Okay. Now. Oh, I'm going to start us off? Okay. We talked about this yesterday. I already forgot. So we're here to give a status update. If you want to move on to the next slide, Aaron. So we had our subcommittee meeting in July, and we had a breakout meeting. Wait, no, that was the engineering. We had a breakout meeting for roadway departure crashes in July to talk about that type of crash, which has the most fatals and serious injuries of all the types of crashes that we've investigate. And then after that meeting, we set up the whole engineering subcommittee meeting to go over what we discussed there and to discuss the legislation. And that was in August 22nd. Next slide. So at the roadway departure meeting, we had discussing one of the things we talked about, because there are so many crashes, serious and fatal injury crashes of this type. We discussed some of the existing department projects that are ongoing or recently completed. And just to give you an idea of what the department's been working on, they've replaced all the curve warning signs on the state roads for where curves meet a certain criteria, and they're currently working on the municipal streets. So we're not just doing state roads with these projects, we're working on the municipal streets. Those are currently in design with construction expected in 2024 to 2025. Some of the other projects that were out there were the your speed feedback signs. You may have seen them on the road. They're the ones that have the electronic display showing what your speed is. Those were distributed through the T2 Center of Yukon, and they would agree to provide 2 signs to each town. 163 of 169 municipalities accepted these signs, so they're now out and being used out today. And one of the third things we've been working on is high friction surface treatments. These are a different type of paving surface that gives better friction in curved sections. And it's now a program. One project per district has been constructed, and moving forward, the department is going to include one more project per district each year. A lot of the strategies we talked about at this meeting to come up with ideas on how to move this forward through the Vision Zero Council. A lot of speeding seems to be related to a lot of crashes. I think it's like 20% of fatals and serious injuries are a result of speeding. So there's a strategic highway safety plan that's required by the federal administration. And one of the strategies that came out of that was safety corridors. And we feel that it would be good to advance that strategy. A safety corridor is, you set up a location on a roadway. Usually they're expressways, but they could be other types of arterials, and with increased enforcement. So these are things like aggressive driving, speeding, racing, things like that we see every day when we're driving to work. And we think, but that is going to require legislation, and there's usually an increase in fines during those safety corridors, similar to how you have increased fines during work zones. We also, our subcommittee really did like the use of speed enforcement cameras, so we'd like to see more use of that. My caution is, and as it was discussed with the dads, was that we didn't want to advance that too fast. I know the department is right now working in work zones for speed enforcement cameras, and we have the new procedures that are out there that I think the commissioner indicated will be online in end of this year, so the municipalities can start implementing these, and we can see how the public reacts to them. I don't want to swamp them with enforcement cameras until they get used to them and we make sure they work, right? I mean, I think to me that is a way to soft pedal this, but we really feel there's a good benefit in speed enforcement cameras moving forward. And the other one is, my company was tasked with coming up with an implementation plan for safety measures in Connecticut, and we talked to all the COGs. And one of the issues is that a lot of the municipalities, smaller rural municipalities especially, don't have any police forces, and there's no way for them to have speed enforcement. So the thought was to increase the use of state police in these municipalities, because even if they have a resident trooper, they still don't have, those people have their own jobs that they have to perform. We talked briefly with the enforcement subcommittee at another meeting, and they weren't necessarily opposed to this, just that staffing is the biggest issue. This would come into play here. But we think it's something that should be pursued. I think it might help in driving down speeds and therefore driving down crashes. Next slide. I think you're up, Natasha.
Yeah, so then, good morning, everyone. So then when we met as a whole group, the engineering subcommittee, we brought forth some of the, wanted to talk, this was in August. So we talked about what passed in the Vision Zero bill and the legislation, as you just have done, Commissioner. And then we then spoke about some of the strategies and brought the outcome of what the roadway departure working group, as Chuck just described, to the whole engineering subcommittee. From that, we talked some more and came up with some additional strategies, not just focused on roadway departure, but as an engineering subcommittee as a whole. There was very vocal proponents for installation of more centerline rumble strips on the roadways. We had a healthy discussion regarding some communities that may be hesitant, but perhaps as they become more, as they get implemented or installed more, there could be a policy to just include them as we do more roadway repaving. So discussion about rumble strips. I was very excited because we had a lot of members that were actually for the inclusion of rumble strips. Something else we talked about was a driver's education. It is now, I believe, people were talking about how sometimes now it's where you have to go to a company or go outside of school. Back when I took it, it was held in the classroom after school. So maybe a mechanism to provide free or more accessible driver education for new student drivers. And the reason it came up in engineering is because we do have more devices in engineering. We have rectangular rapid flashing beacons, leading pedestrian intervals. So engineering devices that could, that could be taught during driver's education from the very beginning to these new drivers, talk about aggressive driving, speeding, how to be a little bit of a defensive driver. So if we could provide more ability for education to the new student drivers, we discussed that. We also discussed an active intervention device for motorists who have multiple speeding offenses. New York just introduced a bill in their legislation. I'm not sure where it stands, but for motorists who have a number of speeding violations, they now are looking to try to get a device, aftermarket device, installed into the vehicle to help regulate the speed of the vehicle. So we talked about that. And then another thing that we talked about was funds for Vision Zero initiatives. We have a lot of ideas that come through sometimes, like this active intervention for motorists, as well as the accessible or free driver education. There is a funding associated, or cost associated with implementing these initiatives. So perhaps there could be a fund for these Vision Zero initiatives. Next slide, please. So the next steps, we're going to continue to develop our strategies with the engineering subcommittee. We're going to combine the strategies from the roadway departure working group that we had, as well as the ones in engineering. Provide a little bit more context and details in our discussion, kind of vet through those and identify what the pros and cons are to help us prioritize our strategies. We are meeting November 15th as a subcommittee, and then we're going to finalize those strategies for the December Vision Zero Council. And that is our update. That is what we have for engineering. If there are any questions, we can answer them. I'm not sure if that's the format, Aaron.
Yeah, I defer to Commissioner Ucalito. I don't know if we want to ask questions after each subcommittee or if we want to save them till the end. I defer to you.
Save them to the end if we have time, just because,
yeah,
we have 3 more subcommittees and limited time today. But I appreciate all the hard work that went into this, and both the July and August meetings, and all the work done to date. So let's go on to the next subcommittee, but hang on if you're able in case questions come up later.
Yes, thank
Thanks.
you.
Next up is our enforcement subcommittee. That's co-chaired by Sergeant John Akampora and Terry Thompson from CROG.
Good morning, everybody. I'll just say first off that the engineering subcommittee, a lot of what they have, we have, and we fully support all of that. We went through a leadership change, so we haven't had a subcommittee meeting yet, but we hope to have one very soon. And then Commissioner will move into our strategies, but I'm just going to go over some of the recommendations and discussions that have been going on. This is a draft that we're going to present to our subcommittee, proposals to resubmit the items that did not get through the bill. And that's the helmet law, establishing the fatal collision reduction team, to engage in high visibility enforcement. There has been some high visibility enforcement, and Sergeant Akapora, who's my co-chair, will talk a little bit about that after I am completed with my section. And the open container law. We really need to figure out exactly what the issue is on some of these and try to figure out how we can come up with a win-win situation, I guess, per se, because we keep trying to do these and we don't get anywhere. So we really need to understand what the pushback is. The other one is the blood alcohol level. Fully support that. We really need to move towards the 0.05. I really appreciated that presentation earlier. I think we all understand that alcohol is a big problem. And then when you add speed to it, it just makes things very much worse. Okay, Aaron, next. New proposals to discuss, and I think that Chuck and Natasha spoke about some of these that we also agree with. Impaired driving enforcement team. We are bringing on somebody that into our subcommittee that is also, Jackie, thank you for sending him over, doing for the drug cannabis use and increasing law enforcement training for that. As Chuck had mentioned, and we keep discussing, we want to do enforcement when we want to do some of these strategies, but staffing at the local and state level is so low that it's not a top priority, I have to say, because there's other things that they're dealing with, especially the municipalities. So that's something we really need to push with the legislation. Driver re-exam based on violation tiered system. There was a lot of discussion in the strategic highway safety plan emphasis areas and in some of the other areas about people that have multiple violations. And is there something that we can do? I mean, if you arrest somebody 3 or 4 times or give them a ticket 3 or 4 times for speeding, is there something else that we can do in terms of that? Strategic Highway Safety Plan Steering Committee, I am on that. I am also engaging with every emphasis area, as are others, so that we can understand what they are looking for, because we kind of work together. Whatever we do, we also have to make sure that we're within the Strategic Highway Safety Plan actions. Next. And that's what this big focus is aligning with that strategic highway safety plan, seeing the data trends and the progress updates and strategies, overlaps, and implementation challenges. So I think we work collectively together as the subcommittees as well as those emphasis area committees. And then next, I'm going to have Sergeant Akampora talk about 2 things that have been going on with them. Go ahead, John, you're on mute. Is he frozen? Oh, John, are you there? I don't know, Aaron, if you can
I
help
can see him.
him.
He's just muted still.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm working on it. Let me see what I can do here.
Okay. You can't get John if Mark DeCoco's on. This was his service unit, so Mark may be able to speak somewhat on this if he is still on. I don't know if he is.
So although not directly related to council functions, I'm sure what John was going to speak about is what was implemented for the state police in order to reduce fatal collisions was a specific fatal collision reduction team at the desk level. And I'm happy to report back that state police fatalities are down approximately 16% with the latest data. So John will be talking to that. But we look forward to the increased solutions coming out of the enforcement subcommittee, and happy to be part of the council. Thank you. And actually, I have John's gonna jump on and speak a little more.
Yeah,
Yeah,
apologize.
my apologies. Just can't seem to get him unmuted.
My apologies, a few issues.
Oh,
with the microphone,
there we
not-
go.
So I jumped into the expert here. Yeah, so I took over for Mark DeCoco. So stepping into this, you know, in a new capacity now, looking forward to everything. Just to touch on some of the things that were implemented prior to me joining the committee with Terry. So the automated enforcement camera work pilot project, as most people are aware, there's 3 vehicles deployed currently out on the roadways. There's been several thousand warnings issued so far as a result. We're about, last time I checked, we're somewhere around 60 violations or 60 infraction tickets that have been sent out through the vendor to offending motorists. Some people, believe it or not, of that 60 are multi-repeat offenders of that in a very quick amount of time, which shows their lack of desire to comply. So hopefully their repeated tickets will the repeated infractions will get them to curb their behavior. Hearing some feedback from some of the guys, the workers in those areas, they say it does make a difference. It seems like with the amount of warning signs, you know, people are slowing down enough in time that it's making a difference, which obviously compliance is what we want at the end of the day. Still has not stopped the, again, several thousand violations that have warnings alone that have been sent out so far. With the expansion of the program, which I would suspect will probably happen, I believe that those 60 violations will quickly grow 10, if not 100,000 fold over in the future. So seems like very positive feedback for that. So we proposed as well sort of speed aggressive driving initiative to have legislation enact a specific a statute for a team. Since that wasn't passed, but we did do it within our umbrella of the traffic services unit. So one side was divided for commercial motor vehicle enforcement. One side was set specifically as a speed and aggressive driving team. We've done about 1 initiative per week. So we basically cycle through troop areas as well as places where the motoring public has made complaints, statistical data where high propensity for fatals are. So on average, we run about 100 to 300 stops on those designated days per week, in addition to other enforcement. So that continues. We combine both sides of the house, both teams there for sort of targeted initiatives. Sometimes it will just be passenger vehicles, sometimes commercial vehicles. So we get a lot of positive feedback as well. People are reporting to us that they're seeing troopers out there more. There's Facebook groups that identify some of our vehicles that are out there. They keep saying they see a certain charger every day, or they see this vehicle. So people are seeing the fruits of our labor. And as if Mark DeCoco didn't say, fatals are down, I still believe about 20% compared to last year. So, you know, we think it's working.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate the update on both of those items and everything you updated us on, Terry.
Thank you. You're welcome. If there's any, well, I'll be around for questions afterwards if there are any.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks. And I note too, as the co-lead for the pedestrian safety emphasis area on the SHSP, I appreciate you, Terry, taking the effort to align, you know, these efforts that work together in concert, where the Vision Zero Council is kind of approaching safety from the policy side, and the SHSP works from the planning and implementation side of actually implementing projects that increase safety. So thanks for bringing that up. Next up, we have our education subcommittee. Today, we know Sean Formica is here, as well as Amy Watkins.
Hi, everybody. Just most of the things that I had to update you on have been mentioned already, which is really great. One is that we are working closely with the Safe Routes to School coordinator, not only to work on advancing that designation of excellence Vision Zero with schools, but also we are doing some work around curriculum for bicycle and pedestrian safety and what that might look like at different levels of of school, so the younger kids through middle school and high school, and what that would look like for bikes and for pedestrians. So we're proposing some of that and working on that in addition to that designation as a Vision Zero school. And as Sean already mentioned, is that the DMV has started with their internal discussions on how they might make that video that was outlined in the law, and what those logistics would be. I think there is a little bit of concern about what funding there might be for that, given the DMV has limited, if any, funds for campaign type things, and so they may at some point be reaching out to explore how they might fund recording a video that would be used. So again, most things have been discussed. We're just moving along in a few areas and staying in touch. We had a meeting last week. So we're all staying in touch and moving things along and ready for whatever else we might be needed to do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sean, maybe ConnDOT and DMV, we can connect on that last point Amy brought up about the funding. I don't know if any of our funds we received from NHTSA are eligible to be used for that, but we can have a discussion.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sean and Amy. And next up, we have the Equity Subcommittee, co-chaired by Catherine Hedberg and Alex Slacky.
Thanks, Aaron. So we met subcommittee a few weeks ago. You can go to the next slide. And I know it's been mentioned before, one of the big topics, and it'll continue to be a big topic, is automated enforcement, which I know DOT is working diligently on, and we're certainly looking forward to seeing the guidelines. And I think a lot of our members had a variety of thoughts about what how implementation might be most effective at the local level. And some of these things aren't necessarily things that would be part of the guidelines specifically, but I think one of the biggest emphases that we heard was making sure that the public outreach is really strong, going to diverse communities, making sure that we're touching all areas of a city or town, reaching seniors, reaching folks who may not speak English, because the key to the effectiveness of the program is, as we know, is going to be public support. So how can we make sure that we're forming the right groups within that town level to facilitate that? I think that's something that's certainly going to be a big priority from the equity subcommittee's standpoint, and also appreciated the comments about trying to make sure it's easy for the municipalities to comply with the guidelines while still making sure the guidelines the guidance is strong and the qualifications are strong. How can we help communities prioritize their top crash corridors? Obviously, different communities have different resources in terms of staff that they can work with. So that's something that we're certainly thinking about, and would welcome further conversation about how we, whether it's a committee at a state level, whatever organization, can help communities prioritize their crash corridors. Ultimately, of course, the responsibility is on the municipality itself. And as I said, the most important goal is to get communities comfortable with automated enforcement. So that's all races, all languages, all ages. I think that's something that we're very much looking at. And then in terms of some future topics of conversation, if you can go to the next slide, I think certainly all of the recommendations that came through today and ones that will be forthcoming in December, I think we'd like to kind of take a deep dive from an equity subcommittee standpoint to make sure all of the proposals are implemented in an equitable way, making sure we get resources distributed to towns and cities across the state, to populations across the state, so that everyone can reap the benefits and make sure that they're implemented in a solid way. So we'll continue to do that. Obviously, the complete streets design criteria is very exciting, and we're looking forward to continuing to track the implementation of that. And then just the, kind of a final note, and certainly would welcome the guidance of the Vision Zero Council on this. Of course, there has been controversy related to traffic stops and traffic stop data collection. Certainly, investigations are ongoing, and there's the Racial Profiling Project Advisory Board that is certainly well attuned to this issue, and I think they've made plenty of recommendations in the past. If that's something that the council thinks that the equity subcommittee should also look at in the future once the results of those investigations are done, we're happy to do so. But also generally looking at traffic stops, how can we do education about the best way that traffic stops should be conducted from in terms of public education. I know that the state police, the police chiefs are working on education related to that. So how can we make sure that those efforts are really streamlined and given again to all the communities across the state? So those are just some of the things we're thinking about for future topics. I think the most pressing one will be taking a look at all the proposals that are here today and making sure that they're airtight from an equity lens, which I think certainly will be. And I'll turn it over to Katie, my new co-chair, who we're really happy to have helping lead the subcommittee to chat about the ADA efforts that she's doing.
Thanks, Alec. So for the next slide, we have, since the last time we met, we did have our 33rd ADA anniversary celebration event in Meriden. Commissioner Ippolito spoke, as well as Amy Jackson Grove. The city of Meriden's mayor and town manager also spoke on their efforts. And we had additional residents from Greenwich and Stamford share their experiences. This was a very successful event with municipalities, members of the public attending. We had different exhibits with UConn T2 Center, as well as WTS and ITE. So this is definitely an event that will probably happen again next year, and we'll keep the committee updated with that. There's also opportunities for ADA training throughout the year. So we've partnered with the ADA Coalition of Connecticut, which is an extension of the ADA National Network. So if anyone's looking for ADA trainings throughout the year, definitely reach out because there are organizations having those, as well as our ADA group within Connecticut DOT.
Great, thank you, and thanks for a great event, Katie, and thank you for the update, Alec. Appreciate the work that the entire equity subcommittee, because you're trying to pay attention to everything else going on in all the other subcommittees, so I know that's a lot.
Okay, with that, I think we just want to have the opportunity for the council members to be able to ask questions and maybe provide some guidance for next steps.
Yeah, so any of the council members, feel free to unmute, jump in, or raise your hand, whichever you prefer. I will note, so the next meeting we have is going to be in December, which Aaron will get into, and that will be the last one before the legislative session starts back up again. So I think, in my opinion, any recommendations the subcommittees have probably need to be provided, probably a month in advance of our December meeting to the council members, so we can all, take a look and discuss it at our December meeting. I will note, as you're thinking about what you want to recommend, the legislative cycle there's the long session years and a short session year. Upcoming is a short session year, meaning it's only starts in February, ends in May. Generally, they consider fewer legislative proposals. So, keep that in mind as you're pulling together recommendations. But I would also say everything a subcommittee recommends doesn't have to be a legislative proposal, right? It can be policy recommendations or just things that you think our agencies should be looking more at, or things that we should keep on our radar, policies that should be implemented, or you know, things you just want us to continue to investigate. So just keep that in mind as you're developing your thoughts, recommendations. So I would say definitely get everything to us at the council level through Aaron a month in advance of our December meeting. So that way we can review those prior to our meeting in December and take action before the legislative session kicks back up again. Susan, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, yes, I did have a question, and it might relate more to the Health Equity Committee. I think there's an overlap between the Health Equity Committee and Education with regard to there's legislation in the Vision Act related to seatbelt safety and using of seatbelts. And I believe DOT is going to be working with a number of different state agencies. DPH would be one of them, to promote seatbelt safety among vulnerable populations. I was wondering, either among the Health Equity or the Education Committee, if anybody has started to identify vulnerable populations, because, you know, getting that work started, I guess, using data to figure out where you should or where it's best to focus your efforts first.
Great question, Susan. Amy or Alec, I don't know if either of you have started those discussions yet at your subcommittee level. I know, you know, here at the ConDOT, it'd be funneled through Joe Cristalli's group. Juliet manages our protection, you know, child protection services, and as well as seatbelt unit here at ConDOT. But I'll see if Alec, you might have something on this. Oh, you're muted still.
3 years haven't learned. I think this is a recommendation that came out of our subcommittee last year. So I think there were a few groups that we had identified, at least in terms of seatbelts in particular, growing the child passenger safety part, which I think is also important. And I know there are separate efforts on that. I think generally we're looking at national data. We don't necessarily have Connecticut specific data, but generally we know Black and Hispanic drivers tend to have lower rates of seatbelt usage. That's from national data. We also know veterans are a group that often have lower rates of seatbelt usage. That some research has shown that, and certainly a population that we want to support in every way possible. And then pregnant women as well. And I think that's also a good overlap from a health standpoint. Is there's a lot of potential issues in terms of understanding the appropriate way to wear a seatbelt. So there's some research that's out there that shows that they might be less inclined to wear seatbelts because of that. So I'm happy to share all that information with you and the whole council.
Yeah, I was just curious. You know, one of my colleagues who works in the Office of Injury Violence Prevention was mentioning that refugees may be a vulnerable population because they're coming from different countries. They're driving. They, you know, had different laws in their own countries, and you have people who either are not using seatbelts or they're not using child safety seats. So when they get stopped for, you know, traffic violation, people are finding that they're not, you know, complying with seatbelt safety. And so I think one of the things so we have 2 local health departments that are working in child car seat safety, but they are working with people who's refugees and other people from countries who may or may not know our seatbelt safety laws and child car seat safety laws. And the 2 local health departments are New Haven and Meriden, and they are providing translators to work with folks in the community around, and the resettlement organizations too, for people who are refugees who are being resettled into Connecticut. So there is that going on. So I was wondering too if that could be, you know, thought about, or, you know, because there's those people that always, you know, come in and don't know what the Connecticut laws. Thanks.
Great point. I will ask our highway safety office just got the approval of their triennial review from NHTSA, so now they are back to focusing on all the programs. So I'll ask them to set up a meeting, invite folks from the Equity and Education Subcommittee as well as DPH staff to attend to start to work on this. So we'll get that kickstarted.
Excellent.
Any other
That's
questions?
wonderful. I really look forward to that because car seat usage and seatbelt usage among parents with young babies is definitely something that could always use more education. So thank you, Susan, and thank you, Garrett.
Yeah, and we'll extend an invite to OEC as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions from council members? Appreciate all the work the subcommittees have done, to date. We had a great legislative session last year. A lot of the recommendations were adopted. For the first go at it, that's pretty impressive. So as you're working on things, just aim to get us things by November, a month in advance of the December meeting, for the council to be able to review and then discuss at our December meeting. Just reminder though, it's going to be a short legislative session, so we're going to probably want to be limited in what we ask and transmit to them. And again, everything doesn't have to be a legislative item. It can be, the reports that we give the legislature can be just policy. It doesn't have to be legislative. It can be policy recommendations or policy direction that the state should be taking too. So thank you again, everyone, for all the hard work. And Aaron, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. So, just like Commissioner Euclid just noted, our next meeting is December 5th. And really, I'm not sure. I imagine that meeting will focus mostly around discussion of those recommendations made by the subcommittees. I'm not sure if anyone else has any topics they'd like to discuss, but certainly we'd like to ask for recommendations on topics folks would like to hear about in 2024. I think we have a few ideas already as to what we might be talking about early in the year, but we'll certainly be looking to fill our agendas, kind of like the one we had today. We had a lot going today, so that was good. Finally, we've made it to the public comment portion of the meeting. Just a reminder, if you'd like to speak, you can raise your virtual hand, or you can enter a question into the question and answer box. We'll prioritize in-person comments over those that come in through the Q&A. I don't have any raised hands right now, but I do have a couple comments in the Q&A. Adam Weber notes, on the complete streets criteria, we will likely see many scenarios where a multi-lane road with no existing bike facilities is proposed to be resurfaced, where the two options might then be to implement a road diet and add bike lanes, or maintain the existing cross-section and request an exemption. Will these types of resurfacing projects now require a traffic analysis in these cases, or will the complete streets criteria supersede?
Good question, Adam. I mean, so we do have some exclusions in the design criteria for simple resurfacing, but when we go in with resurfacing, we generally will try to do things that don't require a traffic analysis or any additional design, such as widening the shoulders significantly and reducing the travel lanes. And I see Mark Carlino is no longer on, so and I don't want to put Natasha on the spot, and I don't recall all the exceptions that were excluded. So I'll take the question, and I'm dealing with a terrible sinus headache today, so I'm not all on the ball, but I'll take the question and get you a more fully thought out response. There are going to be things that this does not apply to, right? The published version has some projects that it's not going to apply to. Simple resurfacing that's not going to require, or where we're not going to take any additional right of way. those types of projects may not necessarily apply to, but others, the intent is to, we also have a large number of projects where we've conducted studies where we can do road diets. There's a large vetted document with a lot of different portions of the state roadway system where engineering construction has identified viable road diets that should be conducted, and those will become projects. So the goal is to advance this. How it rolls out, I think we're gonna see in the next several months. It's going to be a learning curve for us as we go forward, since it just took effect. But that's the intent. And Natasha, our traffic safety engineer, can probably weigh in too, if she has her hand up.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any roadway where we're making a change or revision, so road diet in this case, we would do a traffic analysis to ensure safety and efficiency of the roadway. So we outside of a simple paving job where we're replacing what was existing, because there might be a pothole or deteriorated roadway. Anything that we're making a lane revision, adding a bike lane, we would perform a traffic analysis for. And we do some of this during our corridor overlay projects as well. We do look at past requests from towns, if even for our maintenance VIP projects, if there's an ability for us to make a revision to accommodate all roadway users, we do look at that, and we also will perform a traffic analysis as necessary. So again, we're looking at, if for that traffic analysis, we'll be pulling volume information and crash information as part of that review.
Thank you for the much better answer, Natasha. I will add though onto that too. So one thing that I've definitely been encouraging everyone in our department is, municipalities should definitely be coming to us with requests for safety improvements. Sometimes we have encountered situations where we've wanted to install what we believe to be safety improvements, sidewalks, etc., and there's been objections at the municipal level to doing that. And so that's something that we want to try to stem in the future for sure. Terry.
I just wanted to mention, I'm working with Amy Watkins and some surviving family members of road victims on November 19th, Sunday at Bushnell Park. We're going to be holding the World Day of Remembrance. It's a global event. And we're promoting it right now, and we're trying to get people out there, and we do have some speakers that are going to be at it. We're doing it at the pavilion at the Bushnell Park, and it's a time to just memorialize, I guess is the correct word, all of those people that have lost their lives on the road. And it's also a Vision Zero initiative. Amy, there you are. So I don't know if you have anything else. She's kind of the lead on this.
Sure. One of our asks or our purpose of this, besides honoring the folks that we've lost, is to also encourage legislators and others to support the recommendations of the Vision Zero Council and help with the implementation of the various things that are passed as they're passed. So we will be mentioning the Vision Zero initiative and the sort of work that's been going on, and encourage people to support that work and those recommendations.
Thanks. Yeah, Amy or Terry, if you have information on that event, if you can share it, we'll share it with the council, and we can provide it to people on the mailing list as well.
Thank you very much. I'll put that in the chat for you.
Perfect.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. And I'll share also, since we're talking about events, October 25th is going to be National Buckle Up Phone Down Day. So a bunch of state DOTs are doing that big push on October 25th. So you'll see some social media traffic about that. Missouri DOT has been a leader in buckling up and putting your phone down.
We don't have any more hands raised, but Joe Balskis did add to the chat a reminder that this is National Roundabout Week, and we have a press release out on that. So thank you,
My
Joe.
favorite week. Not joking at all. It actually is one of my favorite. My favorite treatment is installing roundabouts. So it's a great reminder. I just got back from vacation in the UK and spent a lot of time going through various roundabouts on bike, on foot, on car, on bus, on rail. Went over the roundabouts, but still. So okay.
I'm not seeing any more hands raised or questions in the Q&A.
Okay. Well, it was a really lengthy agenda. I appreciate everyone participating today. Good conversation. I look forward to seeing what the various subcommittees recommend to us in the next couple months for discussion in December. And we'll share information about the Remembrance Day and other items that are coming up. So thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Be well, everybody.